they were going to leave, but they weren't being released. They were going to be crammed onto trains that was going to take them to Vught concentration camp, which was in Holland. And at the railway station, there was one moment of joy for Corrie and Betsy. Can you remember what that was? They saw each other at the railway station. Corrie saw Betsy's red hair, and they went to each other and they hugged each other, and they knew that whatever horrors lay ahead of them, they would be able to face them together. That's where we left the story last week. Now the Allies were getting closer. The Allies who were fighting the Germans, they were getting closer, and the women in the concentration camp hoped that they'd be liberated. But after a few days, they were packed into railway carriages and taken to the terrible Ravensbrück concentration camp, or extermination camp, I should say, in Berlin, in Germany. And as they arrived, the prisoners, the women prisoners, were stripped and searched before being given their striped prison clothes. And as Corrie's turn approached, she prayed a prayer. She said, "Lord, please help me somehow to keep my Bible hidden. Don't let it be found." Now here's a question for you. Do you think God answered Corrie's prayer? Who thinks he did? Put your hand up. Yeah, good. Because he did in a remarkable way. Just as Corrie was about to step forward to be searched, there was a bit of a scuffle, a commotion broke out among some of the other women, and the guards got distracted. And Corrie walked straight through, unsearched, with a Bible. Amazing. Now, Ravensbrück was a terrible place because hygiene conditions were awful. Disease was everywhere. A lot of people died. And those who stayed alive, life for them was very difficult because there was a very brutal work program for them. 4:30, imagine that, 4:30 every morning, they had to get out of bed, they had to stand in for hours in deep mud while there was a roll call of all the prisoners. And anyone who collapsed was beaten to death. And the others were made to watch. Truckloads of women arrived, and they didn't go into the prison barracks. They went straight to the gas chambers to be executed. And their bodies burned. And every day the other women could see the smoke from the chimney, which really upset them. I'm sure it would upset you to see that smoke. But Betsy organised Bible studies in the barracks to give the prisoners hope. And as she read the Bible, more and more people joined in. And her deep faith, Betsy's deep faith, was unshakable. And she read in the Bible, "Give thanks to God for all things. Give thanks in everything." And then she added, "Even the lice." Even the lice. And Corrie thought, now she's gone a bit too far there. How can we give thanks to God for lice? But Betsy was right, because there were so many lice on these women that the German guards stayed well away. And that meant that they could have the Bible study meetings every night. They were never disturbed by the German guards because they were so frightened of the lice. Well, Betsy's health began to suffer. She became weak, and one day during the work programme, a female guard screamed at her for only lifting tiny little shovels of soil, because that's all she could manage, into the wheelbarrow. And the guard, the female guard, whipped her there severely in front of Corrie, who could do nothing about it. Now, a male guard was stood there watching as well. Can you see him in the back? And he was gloating as he watched what was happening. The amazing thing is, though, that Betsy felt great sympathy for that female guard who whipped her. And she asked Corrie to pray that she would be forgiven. Well, sadly, because of the cold and the lack of medication, Betsy's health got worse. She was taken to the hospital in the camp in Ravensbrück. And Corrie was sometimes given permission to visit her. On her last visit, Betsy told Corrie her vision for the future. She said, I really want to open a house for former prisoners. I want to turn a concentration camp into a place where Germans can learn to love again. And I want to travel the world telling people about Jesus and how he died to save sinners. Betsy had forgiven the people who held her captive and treated her so badly. And she said to Corrie these words, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." You know, 96,000 women died at Ravensbrück, and Betsy was one of them. She went to be with the Lord on the 16th of December 1944. 12 days later, Corrie was released and walked out through the gates. 1 week later, after that, all the women of her age in the camp were executed. It was years later that Corrie found out that her release was due to a clerical error, a mistake. But of course, God doesn't make mistakes, does he? Corrie was determined to see all of Betsy's wishes become realities, and she set about working to achieve that, and she succeeded. Corrie began to travel from country to country, telling her incredible story of love and forgiveness to the world. She even went to Germany, and it was on one occasion in Germany, as she spoke about the need to forgive, that a man came up to her, held out his hand, and asked her to forgive him. Corrie recognised him straight away. Do you? Who is it?
It was the God that was gloating.
Absolutely right, CJ. It was the guard who was gloating as Betsy was being whipped. Now, at first, Corrie couldn't bring herself to shake his hand. She couldn't do that. But then she thought, well, God's forgiven me, and I must be willing to forgive people, because God is willing to forgive anybody, any sinner who comes to him and asks for forgiveness. And so Corrie, eventually, after a few minutes, she stretched out her hand to take his, and as she did so, she felt this enormous sense of peace flood right through her. She could truly forgive in the way that Betsy had taught her. And Corrie was, later, she was able to find out who was the person who betrayed the family back in Haarlem when somebody, you remember, betrayed them and the Germans discovered what was happening in the house. She found out who it was and she wrote a letter to that person forgiving him. And the man received that letter only days before his death. And we believe that he trusted God for forgiveness when he received that letter. Well, Corrie's worldwide ministry began when she was 53. It was going to last for a further 33 years. She travelled to more than 60 countries. She wanted everyone to know the gospel, the fact that God is willing to forgive anyone who asks, because he sent Jesus to die on the cross in our place. And Corrie wrote many best-selling books. I saw Kevin with one earlier about her life, The Hiding Place, and you can watch the film. It's been made into a motion picture, The Hiding Place. I've watched it several times, really good. The Ten Boom Museum in Haarlem is dedicated to her and her family for their work rescuing people being hunted by the Nazis, especially the Jews. Now, last thing to say is that among the Jews there is a tradition that if you happen to die on the same day as your birthday, then that is a sign that you are being particularly honoured and blessed. And Corrie, strangely, who had done so much in her life to help Jews escape from the Nazis, she died on April the 15th, 1983, which was her 91st birthday. Well, that's the end of the story. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget, if you get a chance, watch the film. It's great.